Cane toads are on the march, sweeping across northern Australia into the wilds of the Kimberley. It's been disastrous for local wildlife, but local rangers are taking on the toads with the help of science.
Australia had tried everything: freezing, trapping, hunting, gene editing, even blasting late-night mating calls through giant speakers. Nothing slowed the toads. The invasion marched on, relentless and unbothered. Then researchers uncovered something remarkable. Not in a high-tech lab, but in a fence no taller than a child's knee. That tiny, almost laughably simple barrier rewrote the strategy, and the science behind it is genius. Now Australia is building a containment line so massive it may determine whether the Pilbara becomes the next ecological disaster. The most destructive creature. In the 1930s, Australian farmers were in a real mess. Their sugarcane fields were getting wiped out by a tiny but vicious enemy, the cane beetle grub. These grubs destroyed the root systems of sugarcane plants. Farmers tried chemicals, sprays, and whatever else science could throw together back then, but nothing worked. The grubs just kept coming, so officials decided to switch strategies. If they could not kill the grubs themselves, maybe they could bring in something that would do the job for them. At the time, this did not sound completely wild. Biological control was becoming a thing.
This looks like a harmless frog. Why is it so dangerous?
And when Australian officials heard that Hawaii had used the cane toad to deal with a similar beetle problem, they thought, perfect, let us just copy that. The only issue? They did not run a single study. Not one test, not one small trial. They imported 102 cane toads from Hawaii and released them near Gordonvale, Queensland. And that one decision changed Australia forever. Those toads multiplied like it was their life's purpose. Now over 200 million toads occupy northern Australia.
Amazing scene where the whole of the ground just shifts.
With some estimates reaching 1.5 billion. Cane toads fanned out across the continent like they were on tour, hopping through forests, deserts, suburbs, and even golf courses. Today, the cane toad is the poster child for invasive species in Australia. They are big, they are ugly, and they do not stop for anything. The biggest one ever recorded, found in January 2023 and nicknamed Toadzilla, was 10 inches long and weighed around 6 pounds. And their diet? Anything that fits into their mouth.
But this jumbo toad weighed in at 6 pounds, which earned it the name Toadzilla.
Insects, small reptiles, rodents, and even dog food. If it moves, they will eat it. If it does not move, they will probably still try. But the shocking thing is, they do not eat the cane beetle. Turns out the beetles lie high up on the cane stalks, way out of a toad's reach, and the grubs hide underground. So the toads were not just useless, they made everything worse. As the toads spread westward, the Australian government pretty much waved the white flag. Controlling them now is basically impossible. Their arrival has wiped out or severely damaged populations of the northern quoll, king brown snake, death adder, blue-tongued lizard, and several others. Entire species are on the edge, all thanks to a single, very bad ecological decision. But here is the real question. What makes the cane toad so incredibly destructive and so ridiculously good at spreading? Why this toad is a biological nightmare.
That is one big toad. A park ranger in Australia stumbled upon this enormous cane toad.
When people talk about the cane toad invasion in Australia, they often mention how fast they spread or how huge their numbers are. But the real secret behind their takeover comes down to one thing: their biology. Cane toads come packed with features that make almost every Australian animal completely unprepared to deal with them. First, these toads are extremely poisonous. Adult cane toads have big poison glands on each shoulder. When something threatens them, a thick, milky toxin oozes out, and if a curious animal bites down on the toad, that toxin goes straight into its mouth. The effect is almost instant. The poison is full of cardiac glycosides, chemicals that cause sodium to flood the victim's heart cells. This makes the heart beat wildly out of rhythm.
If an animal tries to bite at the toad, the venom is secreted directly into the animal's mouth, and its effect is almost instant.
At the same time, potassium builds up between the cells, which can lead to paralysis. Soon after, the animal cannot breathe, starts convulsing, and dies. All of this can happen within minutes. So it is no surprise that most animals quickly learn the cane toad is one snack they should never try. The problem is, in Australia, animals have not had thousands of years to evolve resistance like some predators in the toad's original home in South and Central America. Down there, species like the broad-snouted caiman have natural defenses that help them survive cane toad toxins. But in Australia, even tough animals like freshwater crocodiles are dying in huge numbers. Research on freshwater crocodiles in the Victoria River region documented severe population crashes following cane toad arrival, with mortality rates in some areas exceeding 70%. The pace of their deaths matched the march of the toads almost perfectly. But the adults are not the only issue. Their eggs and tadpoles are poisonous too. Fish, turtles, and other small predators usually feed on eggs in the water, but with cane toads, those same eggs can kill them.
Eggs and the tadpoles are poisonous, which, if ingested by vertebrate predators like fish and turtles, can be fatal.
And cane toads do not just lay a few eggs, they lay waves of them. A single female can lay up to 40,000 in one go. Most animals that produce that many offspring expect only a handful to survive. They follow the R strategy, which means lots of babies, little care. But in Australia, almost all of the cane toad's offspring survive. The ponds fill with black tadpoles that end up poisoning most predators that try eating them. The result? Huge armies of young toads crawling onto land year after year, with almost nothing to stop them. And the scary part is, they are getting faster. Between the 1940s and 1960s, cane toads spread at about 10 kilometers a year. Today they move at more than 50 kilometers a year. Researchers once thought they might be hitching rides on trucks, but after attaching tiny radio trackers to them, they discovered the truth. The toads themselves are sprinting across the land, traveling up to 1.8 kilometers every night. Even more shocking, cane toads are evolving in real time. Research by Professor Richard Shine at the University of Sydney found that toads at the invasion front have evolved longer legs and leaner bodies, making them faster dispersers than their ancestors. The toads at the front, the ones hopping into new territory, have the most extreme traits. They move faster, face less competition, and pass on those traits. So the cane toad was always dangerous, but now, thanks to evolution, it is becoming something even more worrying. Australia's war on toads. Australians absolutely wanted cane toads gone. That part was not up for debate. These toads were toxic, fast-breeding, fast-moving, and seemed to evolve new survival tricks every time someone tried to stop them. Getting rid of millions of them across an entire continent was not like dealing with a bug problem. It was more like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. Every solution felt too small, too slow, or too hopeless against a creature that multiplied like a biological wildfire. The government recommended freezing captured toads, a method considered humane but completely ineffective once the population exploded. Community groups tried loudspeakers broadcasting mating calls, organized night patrols with buckets, and even used air rifles. None of these ideas scaled beyond local efforts. Researchers, meanwhile, aimed for deeper, more scientific solutions. They studied toxins, genetics, breeding patterns, and even tried to weaponize the toad's own biology against them. A futuristic fix that failed. Among all the wild ideas Australia had explored to stop the cane toad invasion, one of the boldest and easily the most futuristic had been the plan to genetically engineer a toad that produced only male offspring. Scientists were genuinely working on it. The method relied on a genetic tool called a W-shredder gene drive, and on paper it looked brilliant. Cane toads did not follow the familiar mammal rulebook. Their determination system worked in the opposite way.
This is a cane toad. You can see that very large triangular ending parotid gland right there.
Instead of males being XY and females being XX, cane toads used ZW for females and ZZ for males. And here came the twist. In cane toads, the egg decides the sex, not the sperm. That single detail opened the door for a clever genetic hack. A W-shredder toad was edited so that every egg containing a W chromosome, which was the one that produced females, became defective. Only Z-bearing eggs survived.
Cane toad eggs. I don't know if you can see them. Right here.
When a male toad fertilized these surviving eggs, He contributed another Z chromosome.
Additionally, wild cane toad tadpoles are already known to eat eggs from their own species.
And every offspring formed as ZZ, which meant all males. No females, no balanced generations, no future breeding. Scientists took it further. If the W shredder gene were placed on the Z chromosome itself, it could spread through the population like a slow-moving wave. Each male passed the edited Z chromosome to the next generation. Over time, more and more cane toads hatched as males. Eventually, the entire population grew so male-heavy that mating collapsed. No females meant no eggs. No eggs meant no cane toads. In theory, it sounded elegant. In reality, it became complicated. The approach faced significant hurdles. Releasing gene-modified organisms raised concerns about ecological risks and unintended spread, especially since cane toads are native to Central and South America. Regulatory approval proved difficult, and the scale of deployment across millions of square kilometers of remote terrain was impractical. While gene drive research continued in laboratories, field biologists in the Northern Territory were making a simpler discovery about how cane toads actually travel across the landscape.
The genetically modified animals consume up to 3 times more eggs than normal tadpoles.
In the end, the solution that finally showed real promise had turned out to be almost ridiculously simple. It was water fencing. The experiment no one expected to work. At first glance, the whole idea seems almost silly, the kind of thing a farmer might try after a long day. A bit of shade cloth, a few metal posts, and suddenly you have built a national defense system? It sounds like a joke. But the science behind it is surprisingly strong, and the results were so dramatic that even seasoned researchers were stunned. Dr. Tim Dempster, a behavioral ecologist from the University of Melbourne, explained the concept in the simplest way possible. Cane toads do not spread by wandering randomly like lost tourists. They move with purpose. They navigate Australia by hopping from one water source to the next. In a harsh, dry landscape, water is not just important, it is everything.
There's got to be something we can do to control the toads, and that's when I decided to create Toad Busters.
A single cattle trough becomes a highway. A leaking irrigation pipe becomes a waypoint. A dam becomes a rest stop. These tiny pockets of water create an invisible ladder that cane toads climb deeper and deeper into the continent. So the logic was simple. Remove the rungs of the ladder and the climb stops. Researchers decided to test this idea in the Victoria River region, an area where artificial water points are scattered across large cattle stations. They did not use fancy technology or expensive equipment. They built fences, plain, practical, almost embarrassingly simple. Shade cloth about 60 centimeters high, held up with wire and metal stakes. The bottom of the cloth was stretched flat along the ground so toads could not dig underneath. Then the team stepped back and waited. And what happened next was harsh. Harsh enough that even the scientists admitted it felt brutal. But it worked. During the dry season, cane toads search for water with the same urgency that humans search for oxygen. They followed their usual routes, hopping straight toward the dams and troughs they had always relied on. But this time, something was different. Instead of slipping into the water and surviving another day, they slammed into a barrier they had no way around. They tried everything: jumping, climbing, burrowing, and squeezing. But the fence held. The water shimmered just a few feet away, completely out of reach. And without water, cane toads simply cannot survive.
And we cannot use these traditional methods that we usually apply to invasive species, such as controlling populations or trying to eradicate them.
In field experiments, researchers found that toads denied access to fenced water sources died from dehydration, typically within 12 hours, while toads at unfenced sites continued to thrive. The message was painfully clear: block the water, block the invasion. This simple, almost accidental-sounding discovery did not just stay on the research pages. It sparked something much bigger: the idea of a toad containment zone. The Great Toad Containment Line. If you thought tiny fences around water points were clever, Australia is now taking that same idea and scaling it up into something huge, something officials are calling a toad break. It's basically a long stretch of land with no water at all, designed to do one simple thing: stop cane toads from ever stepping into the Pilbara. Why does this matter? Because the Pilbara isn't just another patch of land. It's 27 million hectares of fragile habitat, full of unique wildlife, deep cultural heritage, and landscapes that can't afford another ecological disaster. The people living there know that once cane toads move in, they don't move out. So this time, Australia is trying to block them before they arrive,
while contributing to Australia's $25 billion a year invasive species problem.
The state government has now funded the first phase of this giant toad containment zone. And it's not just a government project. It's a collaboration between traditional owners, ranger groups, pastoralists, and scientists from Curtin University, Deakin University, Rangelands Management, and local Aboriginal corporations. It feels like everyone who loves the Pilbara is teaming up for this. Professor Ben Phillips from Curtin has been pushing this plan for over a decade. He says the science behind it is simple. Cane toads can march huge distances during the wet season, but in the dry season, they must find water. No water means no toads. So the toad break works by cutting off access to man-made water points, about 150 of them, in a narrow coastal strip between the Kimberley and the Pilbara. Block those, and the toads hit a wall they can't cross. Phillips explains that this whole idea came out of more than 10 years of research. It's also something Indigenous ranger groups have wanted for years, because they've watched firsthand what cane toads do to the land. And here's the interesting part. Cane toads are now approximately 150 kilometers from Broome. By the 2027 wet season, they're expected to collide straight into the planned containment zone. That's how tight the timeline is. If the containment zone isn't ready in time, the Pilbara could be overrun before anyone gets a second chance. The Rangelands manager, Chris Curnow, says this might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to stop a full-blown ecological disaster. Local custodians, especially the Nyangumarta and Karajari groups, helped map water points, shape the plan, and decide exactly where the barrier should go. Without their knowledge of the land, finding the right spots would have been nearly impossible. Then there's Professor Tim Dempster from Deakin University, who lays it out plainly. Cane toads have already swept across northern Australia since the 1930s.
Public concern about the spread of cane toads across Australia is having unintended consequences.
This containment zone might be the country's final realistic chance to stop them before they reach the Pilbara's ancient gorges, rare species, and traditional food sources. In other words, the toad break isn't just a barrier, it's a last stand, but there are some other problems. The dark side of success. Water fencing sounds like the miracle fix everyone in Australia has been waiting for. A simple mesh barrier, a bit of shade cloth, a few metal stakes, and suddenly cane toads stop their march across the continent. It sounds perfect at first glance, but the second you try to block water for cane toads, you are also blocking water for everything else that lives in the outback. And that is where things get messy. Stopping toads is easy. Stopping toads without hurting native wildlife is the real challenge. Water in Australia's dry interior is not just a resource, it is life itself. Kangaroos, wallabies, dingoes, reptiles, birds, and even rare desert mammals like the bilby rely on the same precious water holes that toads use as stepping stones. When you fence off man-made water points, you are not just shutting out pests, you are shutting out locals who have been drinking from those places for thousands of years. Researchers must carefully design barriers to minimize impact on small reptiles that also need water access. Wildlife managers must ensure native animals can still access alternative water sources. And then there is the human side. Drying dams hit cattle stations hard. Those water points were not built for fun. They keep livestock alive. Each fenced water point means cattle must travel farther to drink, affecting productivity. The project works closely with pastoralists to balance toad control with livestock needs, and the complications do not stop there. Removing or fencing water can disrupt migration routes that native wildlife depend on. Australia's animals move with a rhythm shaped by rain, drought, and ancient instinct. When a dam or trough suddenly becomes a dead zone, the entire pattern shifts. Kangaroos that normally pass through stop coming. Dingoes lose reliable hunting paths. Insects disappear, and when insects vanish, so do the creatures that eat them. It is a chain reaction no one wants to trigger. On top of all that, Australia holds countless natural water sources that cannot be fenced. Floodplains, deep gorges, seasonal billabongs, ancient rock pools, and hidden springs in the desert. These places pulse with life. Many also hold cultural significance for indigenous communities. Block one of these and you are not stopping cane toads. You are damaging ecosystems that have survived since the Ice Age. And nature itself is shifting. Climate change is already redrawing the continent's water map. Warming temperatures create new temporary water bodies after storms, giving toads fresh breeding sites in places once too dry for them. Wet seasons may stretch longer, and rainfall patterns are changing in unpredictable ways. Water fencing works. It is smart, low-tech, and brutally effective, but it comes with a price. The project team addresses these challenges through careful planning. Each barrier site undergoes an environmental assessment. Rangers monitor wildlife impacts, and critically, the containment zone targets only artificial water points, leaving natural ecosystems untouched while still cutting off the toad's primary invasion pathways.